My fellow female activists. Hello, hello. Cathy here, your wellness coach. And we are talking today about wellness again. Yes, in the playlist of wellness, our mental fitness category. And we are talking about Saboteur or Sage Energy. You get to decide. So, yes, you get to decide if you're going to carry Saboteur or Sage Energy. So, yes, this is our wellness playlist. And anyone new here, hello, like and subscribe. And you are likely a perimenopause or menopause woman if you're following me, Cathy Pettis, and I am a fellow female activist like yourself. In this case, I am a volunteer for the most part, but I have been involved on the pain side of being an activist. In any case, we talk about here, because I'm a wellness coach, I want to be a wellness coach for my fellow female activists, and we talk about all things wellness. Okay. So I have 5 main categories when it comes to wellness, and they're boring. Okay. They are boring to talk about, but they are the foundations as to how you create wellness overall. Okay. So, with that said, again, today we're talking about Saboteur or Sage Energy. You get to decide. And as we always do, we have our positive quotient repetitions. Okay, positive quotient repetitions, PQ reps. This is somewhat, you can think of it as, kind of like the root of what meditation really is. So I am a meditator. I used to meditate a lot more than I do now, but I still meditate. But I can assure you that my PQ reps have enhanced my meditation. Okay, so even if you are a meditator, you will appreciate this. So whether you're sitting, standing, laying down even, it's fine. But we're going to go into our PQ reps, and then we'll go into our little topic today. So if you feel safe, only if you feel safe, and hopefully there's no one around you, it's quiet, and you can give yourself the time, okay, to slow down. Feel free to close your eyes. And what we're going to do is several different ways to be in our body. So go ahead and take a few cleansing breaths. So we're going to inhale through our nose and then exhale slowly, okay, through our mouth. So with the audible side. So go ahead, take in an inhale, fill up your lungs, 360, and then go ahead and slowly exhale. Let's go ahead and do a few more of those. Inhale, fill up a little more, and then exhale with a sigh. One more time. Inhale. 360. Fill those lungs. And then go ahead and exhale with a sigh. Now, without changing your breath, go ahead and every time you breathe, count your breath as just say breath. And as you breathe and you say breath, notice what's happening in your body. Again, we're not changing our breath. What parts move? Where do you feel sensation? Now we're going to switch to a different way of PQ repping. Whether you're laying down, sitting, standing, I want you to think about your feet. We don't actually think about our feet too often unless they're hurting. So whether you have shoes on or not, go ahead, plant your feet where they are on whatever surface, and make sure all 4 corners are grounded. You can feel, again, your 4 corners of your feet. They're nice and steady on that surface. And then what I want you to do is go ahead and lift your toes. It might be difficult in shoes, but you should still be able to at least lift your toes and spread them out if you're able. And then go ahead and keep them spread, but push the toes back down to the surface. And you actually might have felt yourself get a little bit elongated. Now feel what it feels like now to have everything, your toes, toe pads, the balls of your feet, all four corners of your feet, really nice and grounded. Can you feel how your feet are adjusting? All of those sensations keep you in your body. Now we'll go ahead, come back. If your eyes are closed like mine, blink them open. That was PQ repping. There is a lot of science behind it. And obviously, you can find out more if you want to learn, and we can talk later. But in the comments, feel free, you want to learn PQ reps, all right? Or connect with me. There's a lot more of that, and it's pretty awesome. So the topic today, it's under the category of mental fitness. So remember I said I have 5 pillars. Well, those 5 pillars of wellness aren't mine. They are literally universal. And any health coach like I am, or any other health professional will agree. Again, there's nothing fun, honestly, about how you can obtain wellness in such a way that's actually for longevity. So they include, okay, not in any particular order, but hydration, okay? Then you have sleep. Then you have nourishment, all right? Then you have movement, and then you have mental fitness. Uh, in our world, that is the medical profession, for whatever reason, mental health is somehow separated from our body, okay? But it is all connected. Our overall wellness includes mental and physical health, right? So this time around, we're talking about mental fitness, okay? That is what the PQ repping has to do with, right? It's entwined in our mental fitness. Mental fitness is basically your ability, okay, to uh, come to any situation, event, circumstance with a positive mindset and see where you could find the opportunity as well as the gift. Now, a lot would be said that, when something bad, quote unquote, happens, how can I ever see that as a gift or an opportunity? Believe me, I know from experience. Yeah, there's a lot that can be considered an opportunity. It may not show up right away. I mean, when there is tragedy, it is obviously you are in that moment. But as you unfold from that circumstance, whatever it is, it's you who gets to decide what's going to become an opportunity and a gift out of what you've experienced. And that's what we're talking about today. Saboteur or sage energy, you get to decide. So, mental fitness is all about, again, realizing, okay, whatever the situation is that I'm in, whatever I'm experiencing, I can choose to face this situation, this event, this circumstance, this decision with either saboteur energy or sage energy. Saboteur energy, unfortunately, are what we consider all type of emotions related to fear. Okay. And I say unfortunately because fear in itself is not a bad, okay, you can't label fear as bad. Fear keeps us alive. It's part of our sympathetic nervous system. The sage energy that I speak of, okay, we actually want to live as much as possible in our sage energy. Sage energy is empathy. Sage energy is curiosity. Sage energy is being focused with clear-headed ingenuity, right? Yes, we use saboteur energy, you can almost say. We use, right, adrenaline. We use certain amounts of cortisol, right? Cortisol keeps you alive. Let's be very, resolute about this. Again, nothing about our emotions are bad, okay, or good. They are just what they are. They are what make us human. The saboteur energy, though, when we send that out, we then give it to others. Whereas when we have sage energy, guess what happens? That same contagion can flitter out, right? It can ripple out. And would you not rather be sending out sage energy so that you can then get sage energy back, right? Saboteur energy, again, is based all on fear. Now, again, staying alive is our brain's only focus. All right. And so it does so sometimes at the expense of our own happiness. Okay. Um, Needless to say, that saboteur energy, it has a place, but only for a moment. You feel pain, right? Let's say you stump your toe. That hurts. That's your brain and your body telling you, "Ooh, you went somewhere you shouldn't have." And for the instant that the pain hits you, that's all it takes for your brain to register that you took a wrong step and that you should not proceed in that step, correct? So it would mean that the longer I stay upset about stubbing my toe, the more energy I'm expending for no good reason. The pain left. I have since walked away and my toe is okay. So there's no reason for me to be upset or to have fear anymore. It takes less than a second for your brain to register that, again, that you have pain. Once that pain has been registered and then you realize what's wrong, you get to then take action. Let's hope, assuming that, you can, with enough cognizant, with everything intact, that you can then turn to sage energy. It's a choice. So saboteur energy, okay? Um, you can think about the fact that sage energy, we get to choose both saboteur or sage. When you are in the sage mode, it's a lot easier to then make decisions that are in your best interest. So let's talk about that. So the first point I want to make is big decisions or a decision, okay, can be more than just one, but when you make a big decision, okay, or when you're about to make a decision, let's say, then that can create, okay, apprehension. It can create feelings of anxiety, nervous energy. Why? Because your brain doesn't like change. It likes the steady state. It wants to have your body and mind in homeostasis. Okay, that means just balance. Well, whenever there is a decision to be made, you are then disturbing that balance. And so your brain is going to go to fear, or you can choose to recognize that you're in the fear mode and then put yourself in a sage. So any big decision or any decision, honestly, okay, 97% of our decisions are made subconsciously, if you did not know that already. Yeah, pretty crazy, right? But because of that, our subconscious, again, is working off of the primitive brain, meaning it is working off of fear first, again, keeping us alive. It's up here in our prefrontal cortex where we want to make decisions. And how we do that? Because we're using sage. Okay. So big decisions or a decision, okay, we want to use, instead of nervous energy, we want to use curiosity. We want to use, even empathy for that matter. Give yourself grace, right? How am I going to make this decision? Okay. How is it going to affect others? Uh, Again, when you're using the sage energy, decisions are not just about maybe what makes me feel awesome in the moment, but it's actually like, how does this have a ripple effect? Okay. Um, One neat way that we have sage energy is using what we call the navigate power in my PQ world. And the navigate power is basically interesting because it's introspective, right? And it's almost like you're taking the higher thought process and saying, at the end of my life, is this going to matter to me? Right. And so you can decide, is it going to be the decision made out of saboteur energy or sage energy? Because at the end of my life, I want to know that I made this decision, not in a negative format, but hopefully, right, in my best interest and that of others. Okay. So point number one, big or small decisions. Okay. When we can step out of our nervous energy, okay, say anxiety, fear, right, and turn that into a sage perspective, we're going to be in a better situation. Okay. So point number two, when you do use sage energy, that takes effort, but it should be actually a more natural feeling. So let's take, for instance, And even though they no longer use the examples of Jedi energy, I love Star Wars, so I will use it. So staying sage. Okay. So we can all agree, right, that the Force, all right, that's sage energy. A Jedi knows how to use that Force. Or if I want to stay away from the Jedi version that they no longer use at Positive Intelligence, which is where mental fitness is coming from, I can use this instance for sure. Um, think about how anyone who uses martial arts, okay, who practices martial arts, I've practiced martial arts before, so I know what it's like. But we are taught right away how to use someone else's energy against them, okay? And not necessarily against them, but to our benefit. And so staying in sage means that we stay clear-headed and focused. We don't let fear take us over. Whenever I can feel myself getting a little worked up, right? And literally, when I was practicing, I practice judo and tai chi. But in judo, right, we're literally are being tossed around. And so back then, not knowing it, what was interesting was that when we were in our practice, mode, we would let each other pull, meaning we would take each other's gis and then we would flip each other. And that was fun. But it was interesting because we didn't end up hurting one another simply because we were being careful. We were using our sage energy as much to pull the person, or I should say, pull them with us, correct? Using their energy against us, as much as making sure that they don't hurt themselves. Okay. When you take someone over your shoulder, it's fun, but it's work, right? But we're using that person's energy to do so. All right. It was a lot easier, believe it or not, to do it using certain movements, right? But using their energy to pull them forward. I say that because I could not have done that if I was too fearful, right? But I was being careful using the technique, and I was able to take my opponent or my sparring partner and use the movement, right? Now, I must admit, when I tried to spar in my one and only competition, I hated it. But it was interesting because I didn't have fear. I was focused. Now, I sucked. Okay. I'm not a competitive person. So I didn't do very well, and that's okay. But I stayed clear-headed and focused enough that I got through the tournament, meaning like, I didn't have to, you know, I did hit my head, I remember, but I do recall that I was fine. But you're on a mat, and that mat is not as cushy as you would think. But anyway, what I'm getting at is that I never got upset. I never got fearful. It was frustrating when I kept losing, but I was never in a state of, oh, I'm so disappointed that I'm just going to give up. This is not worth it. No, I wanted to go through. I mean, I went up for an hour drive to the location with a friend, and her and I were both competing. And what was great, again, was that we were practicing, okay, what we had learned. We were staying clear-headed and trying to maneuver ourselves in such a way that, we were testing what we learned. If I were ever then thereafter in a position where I was starting to feeling threatened by any way, I would take the stance. No, if anyone's been trained in martial arts and even in different uh, what you'd call like sports, there are certain stances that you take. Okay. I've also learned fencing. So we always make sure that our stance, especially in martial arts, is that one foot is in front of the other. Okay. They're not together. And you can't say my feet, but just imagine that, you're in a boxing stance, basically, is what it is. But you're in that position for a reason. So you have better defense stance when your feet are opposite of each other, okay, instead of like this. And I bring that up because, again, sage energy, I wasn't thinking, okay, this person in front of me is arguing with me, but I would take that stance just so that I would center myself. I never thought about that until I was in mental fitness as, like as a student. But we are taught in martial arts, right, to keep ready. Okay. Well, it's not because we're in fear, it's because we're being prepared. There's a sage energy there that keeps us clear-headed and focused. When you're in fear, now, of course, when you are in a life or death situation, fear can turn into adrenaline, and then sometimes you are so laser focused, right, that extraordinary things have happened. Like there was a mature person, okay, she was a grandmother, and she literally lifted a car, all right, because of adrenaline. She needed to release, get the car off of her grandson. And she did save her grandson from it. So, it was amazing, but she didn't want to talk to anyone afterwards. Like it took almost like, I want to say more than several months for finally her to talk to a news reporter. Why? Because when the reporter finally was able to let her, or she was willing to talk, she was so ashamed of herself. She's like, I was able to save my grandson from near death, right? She lifted up a car and he was able to get out, right? She goes, what else did I give up on in my lifetime? Simply because I didn't think I could. So our fears, again, they don't have to be astronomical about life or death. They can be keeping us small simply because we don't think we have even this much of a chance, right? And so that was saboteur energy leading this woman. Then she had this moment of life or death, and her body and her mind kicked in and saved her grandson, which was enormously cool, right? And very awesome. But I can bet you she was never once thinking that she couldn't do it. She was in a life or death situation for someone else. And she was like, I'm going to do everything I can to protect him. And she did. That's sage energy. That is laser focus energy. That is Jedi focus energy. Okay. So understand that, yes, we have the moments where we're using, again, what you would call laser focus for life or death, but those are far few in between. What we're using on a daily basis is our sage energy in such a way that we are working against saboteurs and telling ourselves, okay, in this moment, I can choose to be upset. I can flare out, right? I can act out, or I can choose to think back, okay, step back, and what's going to be best for me and the opposing party, right? Right now, we need this type of sage energy so much, right? It is so toxic right now. And for obvious reasons, but we get to decide how we're going to show up to those oppositions, right? It's not easy, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I can assure you, showing up with the sage energy has a lot more um, to do with yourself and willing to keep your own negativity at a standstill, okay, in check, versus what that other person does. And what's wonderful is that when you're able to stay in sage, that then has a ripple effect. And then you can send that sage energy to your opposition. Saboteur energy has the same contagion. I can send out saboteur energy and I'll get saboteur energy back. You can look at it like karma, right? Or like yin and yang, right? But in this case, what we're trying to default to is not the negative, which is unfortunately how our brains think, right? Again, for survival. But more importantly, how fast can I come from the negative? Because it's going to happen. I go to negative all the time. And it's the amount of which time I can get out of the saboteur energy that counts. I know I'm going to go into saboteur energy. It happens. That's my default. That is human default. But if I can very quickly come from the saboteur energy and turn it into sage energy, I'm going to get that much further ahead. Okay. And that's what we want, to be further ahead in that respect. Again, saboteur energy can work just as well as sage energy, meaning you can send out saboteur energy, it's up to you, or you can decide to turn sage energy and send it to others. Okay. I will also end with this. Okay. with regards to you deciding which you're going to use, either Saboteur energy or Sage energy. When you are in Sage energy, it is a lot easier to be creative. Okay, again, we're talking about how someone, right, is using empathy, curiosity, the idea of expansion versus going inward. Okay, we don't want to be closed off. We don't want to use fear to limit a creative way out of a situation. All right, and one which hopefully will reward both sides or all involved versus only one winning. Okay, we're not here to just win. All right, yes, we want to stop fascism because right now we're in the middle of 2025, the year 2025, and in the US right now, it's not, we're in fascism, okay? And we're trying to stop it and then move back into what we can find of democracy. But it's going to take sage energy. I know that sounds like useless, but it is what's going to happen. We need the tipping point to happen with the population. That's only 3.5% of the population. That's around 12 million people. So out of the 90 million people who couldn't be bothered to vote, if we can get 12 million of them to stand up and decide that they will not let fascism take over permanently, guess what? That's the tipping point, and that's going to take sage energy. They were disillusioned, and a lot of saboteur energy kicked in. But if we can even just turn, again, 12 million of those 90 million people who didn't vote and use sage energy to tell them that, yes, they have power and they can make a difference, think about how much that ripple effect will happen. Tipping point happens with 3.5% of the population. We can obviously make that happen, okay? So again, we need 12 million people of the 90 million who didn't vote last 2024 general election to stand up and fight against fascism, and we will win. And we'll do it with sage energy. And we'll do it in the flow state. That's what I was talking about when you're creative. When we're in the creativity mode, we're using sage energy. And that means that we have this flow state. You hear about how athletes get in the flow state, or when you're an artist or any profession, when you get into that point where you're not thinking about time, when you're not thinking about anything else but your passion, that's the flow state. That's absolutely sage energy. Okay. You can't get into that state of mind in saboteur energy. So we want the creativity to flow. Okay. And that means more sage energy, right? So you get to decide, which do you want, saboteur or sage? It's up to you. And I absolutely know that if you choose sage energy more times than not, you're going to have a much better time as you grow, okay, in your sage. But when you do have your saboteur moments, because they happen all the time, when you have your saboteur moments, you're going to actually be able to step out of the saboteur faster and come into sage. And that makes all the difference, right? So I know it's possible because I am a living example of it. And I would love to have you learn more about it. So we can talk about that. Meanwhile, that does it for today. So again, we want to stay in our sage energy as much as possible and step out of the saboteur energy, okay? Again, saboteur energy, it's okay to let you know you're in pain. It only takes less than 10 seconds to let your body know that there's something wrong, and then you can return, hopefully, to your sage power, all right? It makes all the difference. So until next time, again, make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Take care, take charge, God bless.